Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The rain was falling heavily that morning, turning the streets into rivers of asphalt, glistening under the streetlights. Clara, a young waitress in her 20s, struggled under her small, leaky umbrella. Her wet shoes splashed mud, but she never complained. Every day was a struggle to survive, to send a little money to her ailing mother, and to maintain the hope that life would one day offer her a way out. She entered the small corner cafeteria, an unassuming place where regulars crowded around piping hot coffees and toast. Her eyes fell on a lonely table by the window, where a lone man was finishing his meal. He had the look of a millionaire, tailored suit, gleaming watch, and that quiet aura of power and solitude. His hands trembled slightly as he finished his plate, and a shadow of fatigue or sadness seemed to hang over him. Clara approached timidly, her throat tight. Hunger drove her to a gesture she would never have dared under other circumstances. "Can I have your leftovers, sir?" she asked, pointing to the empty plate with the hesitation of a young girl who never knows whether she will be judged or rejected. Silence fell. The millionaire stared at her, his steely blue eyes seeming to probe her soul. There was something in that gaze that went far beyond simple surprise, recognition, curiosity, an echo of forgotten humanity. Clara felt her heart pound. She was used to being rejected, but this was different. Then the unthinkable happened. The man leaned down slightly, placed his hand on hers, and said in a soft but firm voice, "You deserve better than leftovers. Follow me." That simple gesture, that unexpected word, shattered Clara's world and opened a door to the unimaginable. In the cafeteria, everything continued as before, but for her, nothing would ever be the same again. She didn't know it yet, but that moment marked the beginning of a series of events that would turn her life upside down, revealing secrets, miracles, and truths hidden behind the mask of power and wealth. And in the millionaire's eyes, one could guess a heavy past, a deep loneliness, and a decision that would change his life as much as that of the young waitress. The next morning, Clara still couldn't believe what had happened in the cafeteria. She repeated the millionaire's words in her head, "You deserve better than leftovers." Each word seemed to resonate like a promise of a world she didn't even dare imagine. She arrived at work, her hands still shaking, and timidly told her colleague Sarah what had happened. Sarah, ever skeptical and protective, shook her head. "Clara, you know it can be dangerous. Rich people never do this kind of thing for us simple waitresses." But Clara felt deep down that this gesture was no accident. A few hours later, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She hesitated, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Miss Clara?" said a calm, warm voice. "It's me, the man from yesterday in the cafeteria. I would like to meet you this evening at my home. I have something to propose to you." Clara stood there frozen. Her mind raced. Was this a trap? A scam? Yet the sincerity in that voice inspired a trust she'd never felt in a stranger. That evening, she found herself in front of a vast mansion, surrounded by manicured gardens and fountains illuminated by golden lanterns. The millionaire was waiting for her on the steps, dressed elegantly and smiling kindly. "Welcome, Clara," he said, inviting her in. "I know your life hasn't been easy, and I want to help you change your destiny." Inside, the mansion was a world apart, walls lined with rare works of art, an endless library, and a subtle scent of wood and flowers. Clara felt both wonder and fear. She stood straight, but her heart was beating fast. "I want to offer you a chance, a job with me, a roof over your head, and the opportunity to continue your studies. You will never have to beg or fear the future again." The millionaire's words struck Clara like lightning. She felt her tears welling up, a combination of fear, gratitude, and disbelief. It all seemed too good to be true. But in his eyes, she read sincerity. And for the first time in a long time, Clara felt that fate had changed direction. Clara entered the manor's foyer, her eyes wide with the immensity of the place. Crystal chandeliers cast luminous reflections on the polished parquet floor, and the air was filled with a subtle, refined scent. Every detail seemed to tell a story of luxury, wealth, and power. The millionaire, whose name she still didn't know, invited her to sit in a small, tastefully decorated living room. Soon after, 2 elegantly dressed servants entered to serve her tea. Clara understood that this mansion wasn't just a house, it was a world unto itself, where each person seemed to have a specific role. "I want you to know, Clara," he began, sitting down opposite her, "that what I'm offering you is not just a job. It's an opportunity to rebuild your life, to give you the dignity and security you deserve." Clara felt a mixture of emotion and suspicion. I don't know what to say. Sir. I've never experienced this kind of generosity. "You can call me Jonathan," he replied with a gentle smile. "I want you to feel at home here. Everything will start slowly, you will have simple tasks at first, and little by little, you will learn to handle certain responsibilities. But I ask one thing of you: be honest, work hard, and keep your heart open." While talking with Jonathan, Clara heard voices behind an open door. Children were laughing, running, and seemingly carefree. Her heart sank as she remembered her own childhood marked by poverty and hardship. For the first time in a long time, she felt a warmth she had never known. "Do you have children?" she asked shyly. Jonathan shook his head. "No. But I chose to create a place where people like you, or anyone you might meet, can have a chance. And you'll be a part of that." There was a silence. Clara wondered what exactly this luck entailed. Jonathan looked her straight in the eye and added, "There are secrets here, Clara. Things few people know. But you will learn to discover them, at your own pace. For now, focus on the present." As evening fell, Clara followed Jonathan into a wing of the manor where she would discover her future bedroom. The walls were adorned with antique paintings, and the soft light from the lamps created an almost magical atmosphere. She felt an intense emotion. She was both frightened and amazed, aware that she was entering a world entirely different from her own. That night, as she fell asleep in her cozy bed for the first time, Clara understood one thing: her life had just changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. But she had no idea how this change would force her to confront mysteries, secrets, and choices that would upend everything she thought she knew. The next morning, Clara awoke to soft light filtering through the silk curtains. She could hardly believe she had actually slept in such a comfortable bed. For a few moments, she wondered if it had all been a dream. But when she opened her eyes, the luxurious bedroom reminded her of reality. She was now living in Jonathan's mansion. After quickly getting ready, she went down to the ground floor where an elderly woman, with a serious but kind face, was waiting for her. She introduced herself in a firm voice. "My name is Margaret, head housekeeper. I have been managing the manor staff for over 20 years. From today on, you will be under my responsibility." Margaret handed him a black leather notebook. "Here are the house rules. Read them carefully." Clara opened the notebook. The manor must always be kept spotless. Jonathan's guests must be served with discretion and respect. Some rooms in the mansion are off-limits without permission, notably the West Wing and the private library. Loyalty and confidentiality are absolute. Nothing of this what happens here must not go beyond the walls. Clara felt a shiver as she read the fourth rule. Why so much mystery? Margaret continued. You'll have simple tasks to start with, helping in the kitchen, learning the service protocol, and assisting the gardener with a few small tasks. But remember this, Clara, Mr. Jonathan chose you for a reason. Don't disappoint him. Clara nodded, a little intimidated. Yet, deep inside her, a spark of curiosity was awakening. Why was Jonathan, such a wealthy and respected man, interested in her? Later that day, while helping set the table, Clara heard two employees whispering behind the kitchen door. Do you think she knows? One whispered. No, of course not. Mr. Jonathan never says everything at the beginning. But if she finds out the truth too soon, it could end badly. Clara's heart began to beat faster. She pretended not to hear anything, but her mind was racing. What truth? Why was she being talked about as someone who was about to discover something dangerous? That evening, Jonathan summoned her to his study. The room, lined with ancient books and mysterious objects, exuded both power and secrecy. "Clara," he said, staring at her intensely, "I brought you into my world. But there is one thing you must understand: wealth attracts both light and shadow. You are now bound to me. And sooner or later, you will know the truth. But when that time comes, you will have to choose." These words left Clara flustered, torn between gratitude and a dull fear. She had barely arrived, and already, she sensed that the manor hid much more than luxury and comfort. As the days passed, Clara gradually settled into her new role at the manor. She worked diligently, earning the discreet respect of some of the employees, but still felt the suspicious glances of a few. She quickly realized that trust was hard to earn here. One evening, as she was finishing her chores, she decided to wander through the long, silent corridors. The manor seemed different after dark, every shadow cast by the chandeliers resembled a secret being kept. Arriving at a wide, dark corridor, she noticed an imposing door, locked with an ancient lock. This was the West Wing, the one on the list of forbidden rooms. Her instincts were screaming at her to move away, but an inner voice was whispering otherwise. Clara reached out, stroked the solid wood, and jumped when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned abruptly. It was Margaret. "What are you doing here?" the housekeeper asked sharply. Clara stammered, I got lost in the hallway." Margaret stared at her for a long time, as if guessing her thoughts. "Remember this, Miss Clara, some doors are closed for a good reason. If you want to stay here, don't try to go through them." Clara nodded, but her mind was now aflame. Why was an entire wing of the manor off limits? And why did Margaret have a glint in her eyes of both fear and protection? That night, Clara had trouble sleeping. Dull noises echoed faintly from the West Wing, like muffled whispers. Was it her imagination, or did someone, or something, live behind that door? The next day, Jonathan summoned her again. His gaze was serious, almost dark. "Clara," he said slowly. "Have you been walking near the West Wing?" Her heart skipped a beat. How could he know? She hesitated to lie, but his piercing eyes seemed to read everything inside her. "Yes, sir, but I didn't want to." Jonathan sighed, then stood up and walked over to her. "One day, Clara, you will know what I keep behind these doors. But know this secret may change your perception of me, and perhaps even of yourself." Clara, troubled, looked at him without understanding. One thing became clear to her: her meeting with Jonathan was no accident. In the following days, Clara worked hard to earn Jonathan's full trust. She worked tirelessly, helping wherever she could, and showing genuine gratitude. Gradually, the staff began to accept her more, even though some still viewed her with suspicion. Jonathan, on the other hand, was always mysterious. Sometimes warm, sometimes distant, he seemed to carry an invisible weight on his shoulders. Every time his eyes fell on Clara, there was a strange intensity in his gaze, as if he saw something in her that she herself was unaware of. One evening, while helping Margaret organize old files in the library, Clara made an unexpected discovery. Among the dusty books, a brown leather notebook protruded slightly from a shelf. Intrigued, she discreetly pulled it out, careful not to attract attention. The notebook bore the initials J.L., probably Jonathan's. Opening it, Clara discovered handwritten notes, drawings of plans of the manor and a map of the West Wing, circled in red. Even more disturbing, several phrases came up often. The truth must remain hidden. Clara must be ready before she learns. The past must not repeat itself. Clara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Why was her name in this notebook, when Jonathan claimed to have only met her by chance? Before she could turn any more pages, a voice rang out behind her. "Clara, what are you doing?" It was Jonathan. He was standing at the entrance to the library, his piercing gaze fixed on the notebook she held in her trembling hands. I was tidying up," and I found this by chance," she stammered. Jonathan approached slowly, took the notebook with a calm but firm gesture, and closed it. His face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed a suppressed tension. "Some things shouldn't be discovered too soon, Clara," he said in a low voice. "You have a place here, but you must learn patience." Then, against all expectations, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and added, "One day you will understand why I chose you." This sentence echoed in her mind for a long time. Clara understood then that her presence in this manner had never been the result of chance. It was part of a plan, but what plan? And behind the forbidden door of the West Wing, the truth seemed to be waiting for him, closer than ever. Jonathan's words still echoed in Clara's mind, "You will understand why I chose you." She couldn't stop searching for clues. Every room in the mansion, every look from the staff, every word Jonathan spoke seemed to hide an invisible truth. One night, while everyone was asleep, Clara quietly got up. She could no longer ignore her intuition, the West Wing was calling her. Armed with a flashlight, she padded along the silent corridors. As she walked along the library, a detail caught her eye, a shelf that was slightly out of place, as if it had been handled often. She approached it, pressed down on the wood, and suddenly, there was a discreet click. The shelf slid gently to the side, revealing a dark opening. A secret corridor. Breathless, Clara entered. The narrow walls were covered with cold, old stone, and the air was thick with dust and damp. Her footsteps echoed faintly, and her heart pounded. She moved forward, guided by a mysterious force, until she reached a small metal door at the end of the passage. She reached out her hand, but before she could open it, she heard a noise behind her. She turned around abruptly, someone had followed her. A figure stepped out of the shadows, it was Margaret. "Clara," she whispered with a mixture of anger and fear. "You shouldn't be here." Clara, trembling, replied. "Margaret, please, tell me the truth. Why am I here? Why is my name in Jonathan's notebook? And what is he hiding behind that door?" The housekeeper blanched. For a few seconds, her hard face seemed to waver, revealing deep concern. "It's not for me to tell you," she finally whispered. "But know that what you're looking for could upend everything you think you know." She gently grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her back toward the library. Before closing the entrance to the secret corridor, Margaret gave her one last, almost pleading warning. "For your own good, Clara, never open that door without Jonathan." But in her heart, Clara knew that sooner or later, she would return. For behind that metal door lay the key to her destiny, and perhaps to Jonathan's past. Since discovering the secret corridor, Clara had been unable to sleep. The metal door haunted her thoughts, and Margaret's words echoed in her mind, "What you're looking for could turn everything you think you know upside down." The next day, Jonathan summoned her earlier than usual. He stood in his office, daylight filtering through the thick curtains. His face looked more tired than ever, marked by a quiet gravity. "Clara," he began slowly, "there's no point in denying that you found the secret corridor. Margaret tells me everything." Clara's heart sank. She feared punishment, perhaps even being kicked out of the manor. But Jonathan didn't have anger in his eyes, rather, an unfathomable sadness. He sighed heavily, then stood up and walked over to an antique chest in the corner of the room. After entering a discreet code, he pulled out a thick file. "If I brought you here, Clara, it's no accident. There's a bond between us, much stronger than you can imagine." He placed the folder in front of her. Her hands were shaking when she opened it. Inside were yellowed documents, newspaper clippings, and a black and white photo, a little girl with brown hair and a sad expression, alongside a woman who looked remarkably like Clara. Clara put a hand to her mouth. "It's my mother," she whispered, upset. Jonathan nodded slowly. "Yes. Your mother and I, we knew each other. I owe her a debt. A debt I've never been able to repay." Clara felt dizzy. Childhood memories, hazy but persistent, came flooding back. Her mother had often spoken of an important man, who had ruined her life, but she had never said his name. Why now? Why me? She asked in a broken voice. Jonathan looked away. Because what your mother has protected all these years is behind that door in the West Wing. And you're the only one who has the right to find out. The silence thickened, heavy with revelations and mysteries. Clara, trembling, understood one thing: she was not simply a guest in this mansion. She was at the heart of a truth buried for years. And Jonathan, behind his mask of a powerful millionaire, hid a past in which his own mother had played a crucial role. Clara had barely spoken after Jonathan's revelation. Her hands still trembled at the thought that her mother had somehow been connected to this man she barely knew. Her whole life had just changed, and she felt like this was only the beginning. That evening, Jonathan was waiting for her in the great hall. His face, grave and tired, was lit by the flames of the fireplace. When she approached, he handed her a small, heavy, old iron key. Clara, the time has come. You have the right to know. But know this: once you walk through that door, there will be no turning back. She clutched the key in her hand, feeling its symbolic weight. Her legs wobbly, but her determination pushed her forward. She simply nodded. Together they crossed the silent mansion, took the secret passage behind the library, and advanced down the narrow corridor. Jonathan stopped in front of the heavy metal door. Your mother risked her life to keep this secret. I couldn't reveal it until you were ready. With a lump in her throat, Clara inserted the key into the lock. A click echoed through the silence, and the door slowly opened with a metallic creak. Behind it, a staircase descended into the depths. The air was cold and damp. With each step, Clara felt her heart beat faster. She felt as if she were walking toward a past that directly concerned her. Downstairs, the room was lit by antique lamps. In the center, a solid wooden chest, adorned with strange carvings. Jonathan approached, but instead of opening the chest himself, he turned to face her. This chest contains the truth. Your mother left something in it for you. Clara knelt in front of the chest. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside, carefully wrapped in velvet, were yellowed letters, a silver locket, and a file bearing her mother's full name. Clara picked up the first letter. Her eyes misted over as she recognized the familiar handwriting. Her mother's voice seemed to echo through the words. If you're reading this, my daughter, it's because the truth has finally found its way to you. Don't fear Jonathan. He's not your enemy, but he failed to protect those he loved. This secret is yours now. Clara looked up at Jonathan, upset. What does all this mean? What did you do to my mother? Jonathan lowered his head, visibly weighed down by an old weight. Clara, the real story begins now. Clara still held her mother's letter in her trembling hands. The words echoed within her like a painful echo. She stared at Jonathan, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger, fear, and expectation. Explain this to me, she said, her voice breaking. What did my mother mean? What is this secret you're still keeping from me? Jonathan was silent for a moment, as if the words burned in his throat. Finally, he approached, his face dark with a pain he could no longer contain. Your mother, Evelyn, was a woman of incredible strength, he began. But she was betrayed. Not by me, but by those around her. She once worked with me. Together, we uncovered things many would have preferred to keep buried. Clara frowned. What things? Jonathan sat on an old wooden chair, his hands clasped as if to shield himself from his own memories. We had found evidence of a vast network of corruption involving powerful men. Judges, bankers, politicians. They all had a vested interest in covering up the affair. Your mother was the only one who wanted to reveal everything. I was afraid. I didn't have her courage. And because of me, she was sacrificed. Silence fell, heavy and chilling. Clara felt her heart clench. Sacrificed? You mean, her death wasn't an accident? Jonathan looked down. No. They silenced him. And I I did nothing to stop it. Clara stepped back, tears welling in her eyes. She felt betrayed, crushed under the weight of this truth. And you dare say that you are not my enemy? You were there, and you let her die. Jonathan stood up abruptly, his eyes shining with remorse. Do you think I don't blame myself every day since? Evelyn gave me one last mission, to protect you, and to give you the truth when the time came. This chest, these letters, all of it was meant for you. But there's even more. Within these documents are the evidence they left behind. Evidence that no one has ever seen. Clara, despite her anger, clutched the folder to her chest. A part of her wanted to burn it all, to forget this pain. But another, stronger part, knew she had to uncover to the end what her mother had started. She looked up, her eyes shining with new determination. So I want to know everything. And this time, Jonathan, I swear I won't be afraid. Jonathan stared at her silently, and for the first time, a faint, bitter smile crossed his face. So prepare yourself, Clara. For if you choose this path, those who destroyed your mother will come for you. The underground room seemed more oppressive than ever. The stone walls held back the heavy breath of the history hidden within, and Clara, sitting on the floor, felt the weight of the letters and the file burning her knees. Jonathan, standing in the shadows, watched her silently. He knew that the most difficult moment was coming, the moment when Clara would have to read, with her own eyes, what her mother had left behind. With a trembling hand, Clara opened the second letter. Her mother's handwriting, elegant and firm, danced before her misty eyes. My dear Clara. If you're reading these words, it's because the truth could no longer be buried. I've discovered names, alliances, crimes they've hidden behind smiles and tailored suits. These men rule from the shadows. But remember, the light always shines through. Clara took a deep breath and continued. You must know that Judge Hamilton, Banker Aldrich, and even Senator Wallace are involved. They bought lives, silenced those who could speak out. Jonathan, if he is still here, bears the guilt of not having acted. But you, my daughter, are not a prisoner of his mistakes. You can decide. Clara's hands tightened on the paper. She reread the three names, each syllable etched like a scar. Judge Hamilton. Banker Aldrich. Senator Wallace. She whispered, her voice breaking. Jonathan nodded slowly. They are untouchable men, protected by their money and power. Your mother was the only one who wanted to denounce them, and that's why they made her disappear. Clara felt her heart pound. These names weren't just strangers, she'd seen them on television and in the newspapers, celebrated as pillars of society. The idea that they could be responsible for her mother's death made her shiver with rage. So, she said, clutching the locket she found in the chest. If my mother left this evidence, it's up to me to continue. I won't run away. Jonathan stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and fear. You have his courage. But understand, Clara, if you attack them, you risk everything, your life, your freedom, your future. She looked up at him, her dried tears replaced by a new flame. They've already stolen my mother from me. They won't have my fear. Jonathan remained silent, but deep down, he knew, the fight he had been running from his entire life had been reborn through Clara. And this time, nothing and no one could stop the truth. After a sleepless night, Clara left the manor at dawn, the letters and file carefully hidden in a bag. She walked quickly through the still sleeping streets, her heart pounding. She knew that every minute she spent carrying these documents could put her in danger. But who to turn to? The question gnawed at her. Jonathan was right, the men whose names appeared in the letters controlled a large part of the system. The police, the courts, the press, many were already bought. She couldn't trust anyone. At the corner of a street, her gaze fell on a small cafeteria, still closed. Behind the window, she saw a familiar figure, David Rains, a former college classmate turned freelance journalist. Unlike others, David had a reputation for never selling out. His investigations often caused trouble, but he published anyway, even if it meant putting his career and safety at risk. Clara felt a glimmer of hope. She knocked gently on the window. David looked up in surprise, then opened the door, inviting her in. "Clara? What are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, coffee in hand. "I need your help," she replied in a deep voice. David frowned. He knew her well enough to know she didn't speak lightly. She pulled out one of her mother's letters and placed it on the table. David read it quickly, his eyes widening as the words registered in his mind. "Now do you understand why I came to see you?" said Clara. "Do you realize what you're holding in your hands? If it's true, it's a bomb. Those names, they're untouchables." Clara nodded. "That's why I need you. You're the only one I can trust." David ran a hand over his face, flustered. He knew that publishing such information meant signing a death warrant for his career, maybe even for himself. But seeing the determination in Clara's eyes, he understood she didn't have the luxury of choice. After a long silence, he placed his hand on hers. "Okay. But if we do this, we have to be smart. No rush. No mistakes. We're going to need solid evidence, witnesses, and above all, discretion." Clara felt her eyes fill with gratitude. For the first time since finding the chest, she was no longer alone. But at the same time, a dark figure, sitting in a car parked on the other side of the street, was watching them closely. Phone in hand, the man whispered coldly. "She found a journalist. Warn them, we must act before she speaks." The small cafeteria echoed with the clatter of cups as David absent-mindedly put them away behind the counter. But in his eyes, Clara saw the same concern as her own. She took out the file, opened it on the table, and revealed the yellow documents, the letters, and her mother's locket. David skimmed through the pages, taking quick notes. "If all this is true, Clara, we can't just publish it directly. They would deny it, and you would be destroyed before the truth even came out." Clara grits her teeth. "So what do we do?" David approached, lowering his voice. "We're building a rock-solid case. We're cross-checking the evidence, looking for witnesses who survived their maneuvers, and digging through forgotten archives. When we strike, it will be impossible for them to defend themselves." Clara nodded, even though a dull anxiety twisted in her stomach. Every minute of this work risked attracting the attention of these powerful men. "Do you know anyone who can help us?" she asked. "Yes," David replied. "A former prosecutor who was dismissed after getting too close to certain cases. He's almost a recluse now, but he might have some missing pieces." Clara felt a spark of hope. But before she could respond, a sharp thud echoed against the cafeteria window. A small, circular impact, barely visible. David froze. He exchanged a quick glance with Clara, then immediately turned off the light. "We're being watched," he whispered. They stood in the shadows, breathless. Outside, a black car slowly started up and drove away. Clara felt her hands tremble, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. "They know. They're afraid I'll find out the truth. That means we're on the right track." David nodded, his face tense. "Then we have no choice. We have to start tonight." Clara closed the file, her heart beating like a drum. She understood now, this wasn't just her mother's story. It was a battle against men who had built their empire on silence and blood. And she had just declared war on them. A few days later, Clara and David went to a secluded house, away from prying eyes, to meet the former prosecutor. The man, elderly but still lively, greeted them cautiously. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. "These people, they destroy everything in their path. Even a mere witness is never safe." Clara nodded. "My mother paid with her life for the truth to come out. I'm not afraid anymore." The prosecutor showed them forgotten files, recordings, and even confidential letters never made public. Each document confirmed the corruption of Judge Hamilton, Banker Aldrich, and Senator Wallace. The evidence was overwhelming. "With this," he said, you can reveal everything. Not just for your mother, but for everyone who was victimized. Back in the city, Clara and David decided to strategically break the story. The media, social media, and local press were flooded with irrefutable evidence. The reaction was immediate: official investigations, arrests, and shockwaves through the political and financial worlds. Clara finally felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. Her name and her mother's were now associated with justice, courage, and truth. Jonathan, at her side, looked at her with pride and relief. "You were braver than I ever could have been," he murmured. Clara smiled, clutching her mother's locket to her. "And you had the courage to let me walk this path. Together, we finished what Mom started." The manor, once a place of secrets and mysteries, now seemed bathed in light. Clara knew her life had changed forever. She had inherited her mother's courage, discovered a world she could never have imagined, and most importantly, she had found the strength to transform pain into justice. As she looked out at the horizon, Clara realized that the truth came at a price, but it was worth every sacrifice. And in the newfound silence, a breath of peace finally enveloped his life.